Welcome to Lesson 13 for Saxon Math Intermediate 5. Today we'll talk about multiplication as repeated addition and adding and subtracting dollars and cents. Our objectives for today: after this lesson you should be able to write a multiplication problem that is illustrated by an array, use multiplication to show repeated addition, add and subtract dollars and cents. Some review from your last lesson. We talked about lines, segments, and rays. Remember, lines have arrows on both ends, segments don't have any arrows, and rays have an arrow on one end to show that it goes on forever in one direction. We talked about number lines that have the set of integers labeled on them, which are all whole numbers and their negative opposites. And we also talked about tally marks. And remember, when you make tally marks, the fifth tally mark in a group goes diagonally across the other four. Today we're going to look at multiplication. So multiplication is exactly the same as adding the same number repeatedly over and over again a certain number of times. Here's an example of that. 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 is the same as 4 times 3. They both are equal to 12. So that's why we use multiplication, so that we don't have to have these super long addition problems using the same number over and over again. And multiplication can also be shown by a special picture called an array. And I usually use X's when I make my array. So here's my array of 4 times 3. And you'll notice that in multiplication, your array will always make a rectangle shape. That's important to remember when we talk about a special kind of multiplication called perfect squares. We'll talk about those later on in your math later this year. The other thing to look at is when you look at a multiplication problem, the first number in the multiplication problem tells you how many times you're adding the second number. So 4 times 3 means we're going to have 4 3's and we're going to add them together. If we had 3 times 4, it's really not that big of a deal, but 3 times 4 would actually be 4 plus 4 plus 4. And I say it's not that big of a deal because both of them equal 12. It really doesn't matter, but that's just what it means. The first number tells you how many times you're going to add the second number. The other part of your lesson today is adding and subtracting dollars and cents, which really is no different than adding and subtracting regular numbers, except you have to make sure you line up the decimal points first. Otherwise, you might end up adding dollars from one number to the cents of the other number, and your answer will be totally wrong. So you have to make sure you line up those decimal points first. So here's an example: $3.45 plus $6.23 plus 50 cents. So we're going to line these up. 3.45, 6, and now I'm going to make sure I line my decimal point up so that my cents and my dollars are all in the right spot. And 50 cents. And then I just add like normal, but I'm right away going to put my dollar sign and my decimal point in here. So 5 plus 3 is 8, 5 plus 4 is 9, plus 2 is 11, 6 plus 3 is 9, plus 1 more is 10. So that would be my answer. So it's just the same, just make sure you line up your decimal points. Here's another example. Jana brought a $5 bill to school to pay for lunch. What amount will she have left after paying for lunch that costs $3.25? So we're going to do the same thing, line up our decimal points to subtract. So I'm going to start with my $5, and I know I have cents in the second one, so instead of writing the $5 like they did without the decimal point, I'm going to put a decimal point and 2 zeros in, and then I can do my subtraction. Alright, so I can't do 0 minus anything, so I'm going to borrow right away. Make this a 4. That would be a 10, but then I have to borrow from that and make it a 9, so I can make that a 10. And then I do my subtraction, and I find out that Jana would have $1.75 left. That's all for your lesson today. Make sure you do your practice problems, post any questions you have, and we'll talk about them tomorrow. We'll see you in lesson 14.